Kris Radcliff, orthopedic surgeon from the Spinal Disc Center. What's up, Dr. Radcliff? How you doing, man?
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Not too bad. I'd be better if we weren't talking about all these damn injuries, but
Yeah, yeah. I'm like the downer, right? Like,
I know
we
I
gotta have
said
a week with no injuries. We can just talk about whatever. Yeah, talk
I
about our
said at the
kids.
beginning of the show that you and I talked in the off season about you coming on, and hopefully we won't have to have you that often. Hopefully we
Yeah,
won't have too many injuries, and it's game 2. And it feels like it's nonstop already. This was such a healthy team last year. But for those of
yep.
you guys who don't know Dr. Radcliff, Harvard University, Duke Medical School, used to be down on the sidelines with the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's going to be joining us every single week to break down injuries. But like you said, let's hope next week it's just to talk and catch up here. But let's
Yeah,
jump right in, Doc, because there's a lot to talk about. Big news coming out of Thursday night was Avonte Maddox tears his
yeah,
pectoral muscle and is going to need surgery. But now
yeah.
there's reports that he may or may not be out for the entire season. Can you give us a little insight into that type of injury and what the recovery looks like?
Sure, of course. So the pectoralis muscle is obviously the muscle on the front of the chest. It helps to pull the humerus, the arm bone, in towards the front of the arm. Pec injuries are rare and but are quite serious and quite traumatic. And in general, they're treated surgically. There are a couple of different variations of how to do the surgery. It generally pulls off the humerus part. It pulls off the kind of where it's called the insertion where it attaches. And essentially it's about a ten month recovery, 10 to 12-month recovery. After that, I did a little research on this, and approximately 66% of people return to their pre-injury bench press strength. So, more than half of people do get back to their normal kind of baseline strength, but unfortunately, some folks don't. And either way, it's a long road for Avante.
Yeah, so there were some reports that he's getting a second opinion and may not be out for the entire season. Is that something that you see as a possibility?
Sure, it depends on the extent of the tear. If it's a full thickness tear, then you need a high level athlete. You need a surgical reconstruction, and then he's not going to be able to play for 10 months at least. If it's a partial tear, then I guess it could be followed and rehabilitated carefully and judiciously. That that would still probably be a 3-month window of no playing at least, because obviously the concern is that if he has a partial tear and there's another injury, it could progress and become a full thickness tear.
So either way, not good news for Avonte Maddox and the Philadelphia Eagles here. So let's hope there's another
Absolutely.
guy. There's another guy in the secondary we talked about last week was James Bradbury in the concussion protocol, and you kind of went through for us what that concussion protocol is. For people who weren't watching last week, because now we got Boston Scott, I believe, in the concussion protocol as well.
Yep.
What
Yes.
do they need to do? What hurdles do they need to clear to be able to play on Monday night?
Sure. So it's a five-prong approach, which I went through last week, and it's readily available online for viewers, and it's very evidence-based. The first phase just involves like basic testing, and then the athlete has to be able to exercise, then to do sort of sport-specific drills, and then to be able to do some light contact. And ultimately, it's supervised not only by the team physicians, but by an independent neurological expert. And the independent neurological expert, who's not employed by the team, is in fact employed by the league, has to ultimately clear the athlete back to play. It's likely, in my opinion, although I don't have data to support this, I guess that Bradbury will be back by Monday the 25th, because I think the challenge with Thursday was that it was such a short week that we just didn't have time for him to clear all five steps in time for him to make it. But obviously, I mean, although he had a concussion, he was able to walk off the field. He was still like kind of moving and somewhat conversant. So I would imagine that he's cleared the early phases of the concussion protocol by now, which is just, can you get through your day? Can you do basic stuff without having neurological symptoms? And hopefully he's returning back to at least some exercise.
Yeah, because from a football perspective, it'll be really nice to get James
Yeah,
Bradbury back against
yeah,
this wide receiver crew that the Buccaneers have with Chris Godwin
yeah,
and Mike
agree.
Evans.
Yeah, totally
Now,
agree.
a couple of guys are battling concussions. It appears that there's three players on the Eagles, all who have rib injuries. Fletcher Cox had a rib injury. He was able to play
Yep.
through it, but Blankenship and Kenny Gainwell were ruled out really early in the week last week with rib injuries. What could they be dealing with? And is that really just kind of a threshold, like a pain threshold type of thing, or is there more damage that can be done if they try to play?
So it's usually just a pain threshold thing. The ribs get contused. I would think if it was a rib fracture that they would have delineated that and clarified that. Rib fractures aren't treated surgically either, but they just take much longer to heal. But the problem is obviously in these guys' cases, I mean, if your rib is damaged, every breath hurts, and on top of that, I mean, a lot of the upper extremity movements affect the ribs because the lat muscles are back there, the pecs attach onto the sternum, which is attached to the ribs. So ultimately, the rib injuries really affect upper extremity function, movement, mobility, and even breathing. So if I would think if one of these guys is has a bad contusion and is a lot of pain, they're going to be impaired. The There's some evidence that taping works really well for this. So like I'm sure the athletic trainers are now kind of just working on that. And I guess the taping gives some support to the ribs and kind of helps to splint that area and spread the force out a bit. So I'm actually optimistic that our three rib contusions will be able to return back also on the 25th.
Yeah, more good news because if they can get Blankenship and Gainwell back, because this may be a tough question to answer, but we talk about Avonte Maddox's injury. He's a guy who's been injury prone throughout his career. Some of the
Yeah.
knock on DeAndre Swift, as good as he looked on Thursday night, but one of the knocks on him has always been he continuously gets hurt throughout his 3-year career in the NFL.
Yep.
Is there
Yep.
something to be said for guys who were just injury prone? Is that a real thing that some bodies are just weaker than others that can cause players to be more susceptible to injury?
I don't think so. I think when you get to this level, these guys have been battle tested and sort of proven. I mean, certainly there are people who have bone diseases and soft tissue diseases like osteogenesis imperfecta. Remember that movie Broken
Yeah.
a while ago, and people have soft tissue injuries like Ehlers-Danlos or Marfan's, which can predispose them also to injuries, but obviously these guys are in a whole different category, and they train substantially. I just think it's a reflection of the forces and the damage that they put their bodies through on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And there's another player on this team that's been playing through injury, and that's Haason Reddick. We talked earlier,
Yeah,
I think we spoke last week a little bit about his thumb. He doesn't look like he's the same player the last 2 weeks as he was last year. He was just so dominant, really should have been in the
yeah,
conversation for defensive player of the year. What are
yeah,
we looking at as far as when can he get back to 100% and hopefully be that player that we saw last season?
yeah. It's hard to say. The challenge is that we're not talking about just a bruise going away or even a tendon healing. The problem is, I mean, it's his thumb. It's really involved in delicate movements and perception as well as sensation, and so just slight changes in the feel and force and slight pain, even with heavy contraction, can absolutely um, uh, you know substantially affect thumb function. Now, I'm sure that he's doing detailed hand therapy, and I'm sure he has stress balls and all kinds of other stuff to work on and try to get that dexterity back. But dexterity is a hard thing to develop and train, and it takes, it can take on the order of months. I think this will be a season-long project for him.
Yeah, that's not good news because we need
Yeah,
this defensive line to really
totally
step up
agree.
and cause some pressure on these quarterbacks because the back end is not necessarily our strongest on that defense right now. Well,
Yeah.
another player who left Thursday night's game was Quez Watkins with a hamstring injury. And sometimes you see these guys, they strain a hamstring and it affects them all season long. How do you make sure that you're able to be a fully healed from that hamstring so you don't re-injure it?
So I think time and rest is the biggest piece, and hopefully, since we have kind of a long break, from Thursday through Monday, they'll be able to do that. I would think that he'll be limited participant in practice, at least a kind of, the first couple days, just to try to let that heal some more. I mean, ultimately, most of these hamstring injuries I mean, they're, as you know, they're very common, and most of them are kind of soft tissue sprain or strain injuries. They're technically, I guess, strains, which means that where the muscle attaches to bone, the fibers get kind of damaged and pulled, and thus it's not completely torn or ripped. It's just kind of like inflamed. I think ideally when that inflammation goes down, the real goal here would be to keep him from getting stiff or contracted. And so he should be stretching, I would think, but not necessarily lifting.
All right, last one for you, Dr. Radcliffe. We're going to switch teams here. We're going to go to the New York Jets. Aaron
Yeah,
Rodgers blows out his Achilles, and the reports are now he's shooting to come back in the playoffs, which I think is ridiculous because I don't think there's a
yeah.
chance they even make the playoffs now. But any chance in hell
Wow.
that Aaron Rodgers would be able to come back from an Achilles injury by the playoffs for that Jets team?
No, I don't think so. That
I thought
that
you were
would
going to give me
be
the medical answer. Well, anything's possible. No, he's not coming back.
no, no. I mean, I think he'll be able to go, walk around like, Wawa, get himself a cup of coffee unassisted, but to be able to play at that level, I think it's going to be almost impossible. I mean, even though he's throwing with his upper extremities, but these guys are using their Achilles and their gastrocs to push off and pivot and force. And so I just don't think he's going to have that agility that's critical, for him to be able to deliver the ball where it's got to go.
I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. Non-medical question. Monday night, Philadelphia Eagles. They're favored by 6.5, I think, right now. Do the Eagles win? And if they do they cover?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Uh, And
I,
that's a
I'm
medical opinion
optimistic.
right there.
Yeah, that's my
Medical opinion.
medical opinion. So I'm optimistic. I do think so. Yeah.
Well, guys, that is Dr. Kris Radcliff from the Spinal Disc Center. He's going to be coming to us every week to talk about injuries. So we keep saying it. Hopefully, we don't have a lot to talk to him about, but
Yeah,
it's been
exactly.
some bad luck over the last couple of weeks. But we're going to take
Yeah.
one more break. When we come back, you're going to have just me. We're going to talk a little bit more about this Philadelphia Eagles team, and then we're going to look forward to the Tampa Bay Bucks game on Monday night and look at some of the matchups there. So stay tuned, Dr. Radcliffe. I'll talk to you soon, my man.
Thank you. Thank you.